Hi everyone, this is Kosta and Arman from Look Within Publications. We're excited to share with you Weola Live Q&A broadcast from March 28, 2021. We hope you find insights from these conversations beneficial to you as you go about your day-to-day life experience. For the list of upcoming Weola Live broadcasts, events, and courses, visit www.weola.one and follow us on social media at We All Are One. We're looking forward to more of your happily ever now. Segment 1. Here now present at all times, available for all of your questions when in format like this. These days has been more than ever clear to Kosta that identities that he is assuming throughout the day are equally proportional to the amount of attention he gives to them. They were observing beautiful friends they've been staying with on this trip and how they are syncing up their professional lives and private lives with their family time. This is Kosta's beautiful dance partner that he was dancing with while living in various cities. She was in Chicago and Kosta was in New York, and she already had the first child while they were starting to dance. And so this has been one of the really closest examples for Kosta and Armand about this identity too. This identity that they've been really looking for quite some time and in the process of starting their own family. But the reason why we're bringing this to the attention is that when the new exciting identity or any topic that you give your attention to, but we'll talk about it from a form of identity, from a point of identity. When you're ready to assume an identity of something that you might have been desiring for quite some time, and through the process of your discovery, you're bringing it to life, and it's taking one shape after another. It takes sometimes moment for you to get that and weave it in with other identities that you have going on. Kosta and Armand have been thinking, how is this going to look like even for this broadcast? There is friends time, and then there is them being uncles to these beautiful children, one baby and one almost 6-year-old who really thinks she's 7 years old, but she's really 6 years old. And then seeing variety of things from the life starting through, and then the life taking on the shape in a form of a variety of activities. And Kosta was thinking, how is this going to look like? And then realized this is really a perfect opportunity to see how is it to experience family life while continuing to do something of big importance to Armand and him. And so he immersed himself as much as he could, especially within the first day, into this new identity. Not that he will ever replace the parents, but at that time wanted to take on any task that he could get. Changing diapers, feeding, taking a shower, or preparing the older girl for taking the shower and putting her to sleep, and making sure that everyone is ready and tucked in. And then this morning, very early, waking up and taking some of those activities again. In other words, immersing himself into that identity, while also looking for the other identities, such as his own personal identity, such as his identity as a life partner, such as his identity of someone who is flowing the energy like this, in a setup that was prepared the last night, in the angle of where the camera is going to sit. And in other words, what we're bringing to your attention in the beginning of this broadcast is that anything that you've been desiring for some time and that you see it's coming to you, you have an opportunity either to bump into it and then make it happen, or gradually, incrementally, through your own question-answer balance dance, find an ease about making preferences and then really finding new opportunities to bring that new identity of that new desire that's coming through, and especially when it comes through, to the place of more easy transition or more easy blending with all other identities that you have going on. And as we go into your questions in a minute, we wanted to start with this sentiment about identities. You get to choose how long you are whatever identity that you carry on within you at that time. And you do that through the power of your attention, through the power of you giving focus. You're always focused most of the time, predominantly, not so much as you sleep or when you rest or when you meditate or sometimes even appreciate and check yourself out from your active thoughts. But most of the time you are focused, which means most of the time you have some kind of identity assigned to you. At the moment, you may be observer of things, or you may be active participant of things. You may be a friend and a mother and an employee and a business owner. In other words, all of those things, anything you give your attention to puts you in a place of activating that identity for the duration of the time. And we know we already said it 2 or 3 times, even in this short start, but we really, really are feeling you're ready to hear even more on that. In thrill and excitement to hear what is on your mind, go ahead.
Hi, Weola. I'm super excited to ask this question. So last week, a beautiful friend from the Netherlands, she sent me 2 quotes that she created from one of the segments that she listened. And there were very simple quotes, and I shared it on Weola's group. And then I would like to read it. Just 1 second. To be more specific, with my question. Just 1 second, please. And the quote says, "All is always well, all is always available to you, and all is loving you." And of course, it resonated very much with me and with my knowing. But then another beautiful friend posted a question or reflection, and she said, "It is so, yet I struggle with seeing the all is well part when I see suffering. What is this magic and how do I know it?" So I took my time to align because I thought it's a brilliant question. And the reason was because I actually couldn't download a clear answer, because it seems to me that I'm so sure and I know so much that all is well at all times that I kind of like couldn't even explain it, why it was almost like, well, it is. And I did, elaborate something and I answered, but I would like your reflection on that topic, and specifically on that quote and the question that a friend was asking.
Well, we'll start in a place of where were you when reading this kind of segment, and where is this other person when reading this other segment. In other words, we often hear variety of vibrations and frequency interacting in a certain way. And while it's easy to recognize when someone is on a certain frequency of that which you call positive emotion or negative emotion and those matching up, sometimes there is this matchup that doesn't really resonate with some, is how can I be in this place of and in this state of high vibing, positive energy, positive emotions, and then someone having something on an opposite end and those still coming through. And we often say that because some are steady, the other ones are looking to get to that steady, and the ones that are steady are most of the time. Once you really feel so steady, you're ready to open up the door and look for a little bit of trouble that includes some people that might be a little bit excessively focused. And that's the next thing that we want to talk to you about. you have resonated with this and you did not even look for the ways to explain this because you were absorbing this, or you were in a place of as unfocused as you might get to receive the feeling of knowing about what was said. You can really refer back to it. All is always well with you. All is always loving you. In other words, all is always available to you. Those are very steady words. Those are very steady words, so much so that you do not even know how to explain them because they're true to the core of your being. When you're in a balance between your own question answer dance, and you can take your attention from something in a focus and get into the place of more steady focus on focus dance, where you can see it from that wider perspective. And then there is a friend that you mentioned that might have been more in a focused place at that time. In other words, observing this and observing this or observing this. Regardless of that being observing the suffering or some unpleasantries, or being observing some kind of ecstatic movement of the energy. In other words, or pure positive feeling of that ecstasy and a lot of energy and thrill and enthusiasm, whatever positive emotion you can come with. In other words, when you're so focused, when you're so in a place of directing your attention, you're inevitably making preferences. And therefore, while you're making preferences, you cannot resonate with something that is preferencesless, if that is the word. Something that does not have the preference. Your unfocused time, your balanced time between unfocused and unfocused is what we started referring to being, has nothing to do with making preferences. You're making preferences in a place of when you are observing and when you're focused. When you are in that place of unfocused, there are no preferences. And you can be in that state of making minimal to no preferences while you're blended between dancing between your question and answer. Because when you see the value of the question and the answer and the whole discovery process in between, when you see the value of being focused, so much so, but also being in a process of unfocusing enough time that the pillars of your steadiness are getting you to be so steady, then you are not really running into making preferences immediately. Then you are getting to that place that you describe as knowing, and not really that many words knowing to describe. So as you really well understand, there is nothing for you that you have to do in order for this other person to see that. But if there is any suggestion in these situations that you can make, is that at the moment of looking into some of these things that resonate for you in a place of knowing, and someone is seeing it from the place of that which is more focused, suggesting to look back into this once these people are a little bit more relaxed, once these people are a little bit more in a place of meditative state, not necessarily meditating, but meditative state, or something a little bit more cheerful, a little bit more easy. And if that is really the place that they're not getting as often, the conversation is really there. Not in what is the message, not in what the words are, but also saying that there is a possibility for you to move your attention from any kind of discomfort, including suffering, into the place of steadiness, because that which you're observing as something that has any kind of discomfort is so much so potent in focus that in order for you to see it from a different perspective, you want to get yourself to that different perspective. And that is by using any tool that will get you to that place, any tool that would kind of in a way soften up the sharp, razor sharp focus that you might have in that time. There is nothing wrong with sharp focus. There is nothing wrong with observing that which is your reality and making preferences and choosing from that variety of things that are there. But there is really nothing more satisfying than when you find a balance with that which makes most of your time, with occasional softening into that which is explored and experienced and called by many as divine, God, everything that exists, wider perspective, broader perspective, zoomed out perspective, blurrier perspective, that where you can really pull back for a moment, and in the process of pulling up, in the process of pulling up, you're discovering that there are different angles to see things, especially if you want, as we're sure this person wants to change that which is observed and seen not only by her but by so many. The only way to change what's happening is to change the perspective, and the only way to change the perspective is to be on a lookout and have the opportunities that come to you be used as tools for you to move in a different perspective, to see things from this angle and this angle and this angle, regardless of how wide or narrow it is. So movement between variety of things that are catching the attention, and then this can give the focus, and this can give the focus, and this can give the focus, the variety of them giving variety of feelings. And the moment that the movement is there between the things that are causing suffering and the things that are causing less suffering and the things that are causing no suffering, the movement is happening, and therefore the tools start showing up. And once the tools for steadiness start showing up, they're always there, but showing up in terms of resonating with this person for this moment, then the movement towards that wider perspective will start happening, and they will be able to see or to feel or to experience the naturalness, the natural experience of that knowing that you've already had and just did not pay attention for some time.
And how would you describe happiness? What is happiness?
Happiness or satisfaction is movement. Happiness or positive emotion or satisfaction is movement, consistent movement. Happiness is not destination. Happiness is not the goal. You might have those destinations and goals to get you in a place where you can experience more satisfaction along the way. And while in the moment of experiencing destination or the goal, you're having satisfaction, you can have satisfaction along the way to such place of understanding that you do not start even making distinction between variety of emotions. That's when you, as we recently started saying, start living beyond the emotions. Not without emotions, not without having them to be part of your experience. As you're in that place of living beyond the emotions, most of the time you get to recognize that most natural set of emotions or points of emotions that you call happiness and satisfaction and love and appreciation. But you can get there to feel so consistently only when you see the value of all of them. In other words, because as you go and try sometimes to eradicate those negative emotions, you're in a place of inclusion, and that wholeness that you feel with everything that exists cannot be fulfilled in a way where you can even feel those positive emotions in that way. In other words, it feels more like a hit or miss. But once you come to the place of steady, once you just are in the experience of that which is often referred to as relaxed meditative state more times, regardless of what tool you use to get there, then you start seeing that each of the emotions has the benefit. And then from that point on, really every emotion feels like happiness.
Thank you.
Really, really, really excellent way to start questions today. Go ahead, we're ready for more.
Hi, Weola. So before I begin with my question today, I just want to share something, an experience off of the conversation that we had last week that I thought would be fun for you and everybody else. So last week, one of the questions that I asked you was about the state of consciousness of wholeness, where you feel so whole and complete that there's no preferences or desires, versus the state of consciousness where you have a preference, but you're letting go of the how and the when. And then you were saying, when you're in that state of wholeness, really things happen immediately. I mean, we're talking about ice cream, like vanilla and chocolate ice cream as an analogy for desires. And anyway, after that, after our conversation, I had to leave early because I had something else to do. But afterwards, I went downstairs to my fridge and I was getting dinner for my puppy. And as I opened the freezer, there was a Haagen-Dazs ice cream in there that was both chocolate and vanilla ice cream, like 2 in 1. And the funny thing about that is, so one, my favorite ice cream is Haagen-Dazs. Two, my husband would never buy that ice cream because he has dairy-free ice cream. And I know I didn't buy it. So I sat there thinking, how did this get in my fridge? And then I was like, turned around to my husband. I'm like, honey, did you get like Haagen-Dazs ice cream? And he was like, no, I didn't. I thought it was the ice cream that I usually get. But he ended up getting that by quote unquote accident. Anyway, I thought it was hilarious because we were talking about ice cream. And obviously it was like, for me, an instant manifestation, and it was fun.
Anything you give your attention to is going to be there, which means you gave the equal attention both to vanilla and chocolate. Otherwise, your preference would be made with even more detail. So next time, be clear about what the preference is. We're making a little joke here with you because what you're talking about and those ways of things coming to you really resonates with what we started talking about. Your identity that you gave attention to as someone who is eating ice cream at that time, or that is the topic that you have, or that is the activity that you have, was active, and there was not much going on when it comes to what kind of ice cream you prefer more, and you probably had resonance by talking about it, that you really enjoy those ice creams and that sometimes you prefer this one and sometimes you prefer that one, but giving the equal attention to it brought both of them in one for you. In other words, it was all you and you and you. Regardless of who put it in a basket of your husband, it was still you who had experienced all of that, and discovery of it, the discovery of you showing up in your fridge to see it, is really was the most satisfying part about it. You can have a lot of experiences show up to you. This is a brilliant example of that. Brilliant example of you being lighthearted about some of these topics. And while this is easy with some of the things, such as what kind of ice cream you would like to eat or ice cream on its own, this type of experience can be yours for anything that you have. Regardless of, now we understand it does not come as easy and as clear and as fast as the ice cream, but the movement and switching your perspective of something that was very important to you, even for the longest time. Actually, what we want to bring to your attention is that regardless of how big desire is, and sometimes you're observing the becoming of that desire, and sometimes you measure it, and then you're checking in with that desire, and then it's not there, and then you're checking in, and then it's not there. In other words, then you're dancing and playing this beautiful question-answer dance. The moment that bigger desire that's been really cooking up for like months, or sometimes for years, or sometimes for decades, you know that it's coming to you once it feels that it's in a perimeter of ice cream showing up into your fridge, because that is exactly the process that happens. Your gap within that desire becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, desire becoming more natural, more natural, more natural, and at the moment when it feels like it's really not that big of a deal, when you're making this preference such as what kind of ice cream you're going to have, that big desire that used to be big desire becomes and joins you in that place of ease, and then there is no way for you but to experience it in your physicality.
That's delicious. And yes, a very fun experience. Thank you for that. The next thing that I wanted to really talk to you about was, again, sort of going deeper into the conversation that we had last week and elaborating on it. So with regards to the two states of consciousness that I just described to you, it's really more about me having a wider perspective, a broader awareness now of the role of those two states of consciousness in the creation process.
Would not even call them two states of consciousness, because sometimes you get all tangled up and wrapped up with this terminology of taking identity within this state or taking identity within this state. In other words, more you get to blur the lines between identities, no matter how polar opposite they feel to you, more ease about movement you have. So if the word perspective works better for you for some time, use that word. You've used it, that's why we're repeating it. Perspective of this giving the attention or not giving the attention bringing the integration within you, or giving the attention and making preference, and so on and so forth. The sooner you start seeing that it's you dancing between identities, not you defining identities or states of being or states of consciousness, as you call, then you quicker move between all of them, and you feel more movement while feeling simultaneously more balance. And that's when really life starts becoming magic.
So this is kind of my question here, actually. Okay, a while back, one of the conversations that I had with Abe, I remember her saying to me this line that really stuck with me in one of our conversations. It was, you need contrast to feed the vortex, okay? And so from this perspective of the energy of wholeness, and my own experience of that, that's all I can share, was that when I was in that state, I couldn't want and I couldn't desire. Like, it was just because I felt so whole and complete. There was just, there was no wanting or preferences when I was experiencing that that energy. Anyway, and then when I'm sort of experiencing having a preference, and that can take whatever form it does. Sometimes I'm letting go of the how and the when, and I'm going straight into discovery, or sometimes there's a bit more resistance and I ease myself into that place of steady. Anyway, so there's kind of that movement really between the energy of wholeness and then that energy of making preferences. And so my question really is that both of them I'm seeing now or I'm feeling on a deep level, they both play a role, because if I was always in that state of wholeness, I would never be able to make preferences, at least from my own experience, because I couldn't from that state. It was because I felt so whole. So both play a role. Like, the reason why I'm not supposed to be there 24/7 is because otherwise, how could I make preferences? How could I have desires?
How can you find more of that feeling of wholeness? That's what you call wholeness. It's not a whole that you felt, and then every time you make the preference, you come back to the same whole. We say that you're not going to the same whole. Every time you make the preference, that wholeness or feeling of ease and love and appreciation and satisfaction and naturalness of that, everything that exists perspective, God perspective, it becomes more and more. The whole universe, you in that wider perspective, being that universe, completely reconfigured. You might feel that the discovery is happening only in that physical part, but the reason why you go into making preferences, or that what you call having some of those contrasting experiences, is so you can feel more of that wholeness, so you can feel more of that wholeness, so you can feel more of that wholeness. What you were talking about in the beginning of this last statement is that what you were feeling maybe for the first time in that sense, that moving into the wholeness where you were really getting yourself to the point where you can quiet your mind in a certain way, or get your mind not to rush into anything too focused, maybe even meditating, and then getting you to the place of that feeling of ease and satisfaction. And for some time, that was a new discovered place for you, because that is the most natural place for you. Kosta has been, as we said, and Armand, really hanging out with the baby now, a 9-month-old baby, and seeing how much of that presence is actually there. That natural state of that which you call wholeness or satisfaction and ease, and very little preference is making. Preference to be changed as a diaper, preference to eat, preference to sleep. So within that sense, Kosta had this beautiful reminder that this is what you came for more and more. This is what you came with, equipped. You're equipped with this perspective of wideness, so much so that when you go into exploring your life, sometimes you go into the complete opposite section. And that is okay, because those boundaries, especially in the young adolescent years that you're having, those boundaries that are being pushed is, how much can I focus? That is really the job you and every other focusing mechanism gets to. So I know how it feels to be here in a wider perspective. That is the perspective I came from. And now I want to see what is the boundary. How much can I focus? How much of that contrast can I handle? How sometimes disengage in satisfaction, or how much discomfort can I feel and experience in order to see the range, that range that never stops. And while you've been going into that direction, there are some people, some brilliant focusers that they get and they stay in that place even throughout the whole iteration. But then at some point, once you start balancing out, you start remembering what you withdraw your attention from, which you withdraw your attention from that which you call wholeness. In other words, that which you call wider perspective, and then going into the focus. And now the unfocus, which was natural to you, was dissipating, and focus has been sharpening. And then the focus has been so sharp for so long that you feel like you were discovering the wholeness. You were just now blending it really all together. And now when you got to the point to again feel the wholeness, you do not want to go and become a baby again. You do not want to go into that place where the only attention you have is to ask for food or go to sleep. In other words, there is time for that before you go out of this and you're ready for the next physical iteration. But at this moment, what you're doing is you're coming back to what's natural, but you're not going all the way back. You've been in this wide place. We have really never explained it this way before. You have been in this wider place, you started zooming in, and now you saw how much it is, and now all of a sudden you're dancing, you're pulsating between the focus and unfocus, pulsating with so much ease, so much more and more ease, that then you're so satisfying about that part, that when you feel like you got to the point of mastering that balance, you're ready to ease back into that which you call non-physical, or that which we call very physical from a wider perspective, and then ready to rush into the more experience of that which has been integrated. And so that brilliant feeling of wholeness you found, and that calling that you've had of making new preferences and desires, was you coming back to the place of more balance. And now you get to be the person to open the door to make the preferences. You get to be the person to look for a pebble in the shoe. You get to be the person not to try to stretch how much you can focus, because you know that it's not really about how much you focus or how much you unfocus, but it's about the movement between the two, the movement between all brilliant questions that you're asking and then all brilliant answer that you're receiving, movement between discovery from answer to another question, and then once you get clarity of questions, to the movement to the new, and discovery to clarity of answers, and so on. And that movement is that we really have been talking about since the very beginning.
So to fine tune, so shed some light on this. So that experience that I had, the feeling was, in that particular experience, I genuinely didn't have preferences. It was like it's perfect, right? So in that experience, I physically couldn't make a preference. And I guess what I'm saying is, in that particular experience, is it possible to make a preference? Because I know you're talking about the movement here between both, but I'm saying in that specific experience that I was experiencing where I felt I couldn't, are you saying that there is more to experience because I could, or are you saying
are experiencing more because the making of the preference was not dominant anymore, and you come back to the place of wholeness, but then realize that you do not want to be unfocused, that you do not want to transition and move on into the other physical iteration. You felt reborn. That's what many people say. It's the spiritual awakening. That's what many people call that which is rebirth. You realized, you went back to the place of that steadiness, so much so that then you said, I got it. I got it now what this whole thing is about. It's not that I was unfocused and now fully focused and now I'm unfocused and out. It is that I was so unfocused and gradually getting into the focus, moved on the scale of focus, pushing so much, maybe sometimes too much, and now got back to experience this only to understand that it's not about the state of focus or a state of unfocus. It's not only about physical or not physical. It's not only about the question or it's about answer. It is about the movement that I came to experience from this blended, integrated, really perfect perspective.
I love that. Yes. And I feel like I'm really aware of this more than ever before, actually, through, you know, on a deeper level through our conversation last week. And
You also easily say that from that place of being physically born is the first perspective that you have. And the ones that have that feeling of steadiness, there are some that experience preferences but keep predominant place of that which is what you call wholeness and continue exploring. They do not have experiences of being reborn. And then some, like you, most like you, are experiencing this brilliant movement and find that place of being reborn, finding their wholeness, and then applying the wholeness into their focus. And then there are some, not that big of a group too, that will find their resonance only when they go back into non-physical. In other words, their reemergence out of this iteration into the next one feels like rebirth too. You usually do not have more than that, because if you know, when you know that there is the place of naturalness of that which you call whole and wholeness, there is only application to feel more layers within that, but system is already within you, and then the tools are the only ones that are changing based off of your brilliant preferences.
Okay, this is beautiful because I feel like you kind of know what I'm next going to say from stuff that you've just said here. So, okay, when I was younger, I grew up in a Hindu family. So we used to take a lot of trips to India. And I met a lot of people there who, in this physical iteration, I perceived was living in that state of what I now understand as wholeness. So Sai Baba was somebody who I met and interacted with. And things that I observed as a kid was, okay, I know we're always manifesting, like everything is an instant manifestation. We are never not manifesting. But he was able to instantly manifest things that he wanted. So like a physical object, like, you know, like that, like a necklace, a food, or people would come to him who were dying or who were blind, and then he would touch them and suddenly they're like, you know, well and walking again. Was he doing that from that space of wholeness because he saw them in that state of consciousness as somebody who wasn't unwell, as somebody who was whole? And the same thing with, you spoke about it will happen immediately when you're in that space of wholeness. So obviously when he was immediately manifesting stuff, that's what was going on. He was in that space of wholeness where it came immediately, is question one. And then question two, would he have had desires if he was predominantly living in that state of consciousness? Like, would he have had preferences and desires? I mean, maybe he didn't, I don't know, but he seemed to predominantly be living in that, what people label enlightenment, whatever. But yeah, so those are my two questions about that.
Well, the first part is that anyone who is part of that circle, anyone who is part of that experience, of that which you might call alchemy, or something that's coming out of the thin air and showing the necklaces and these spoons. Usually there is a lot of people liking spoons to be shown or bent, or in other words, something that seems unattainable to the normal eye. Anyone who is witnessing it is in on that. Someone might be holding the space of knowing it, seeing it, doing it, and demonstrating on his or her own. And then anyone who gets to witness it joins into that which you call sometimes frequency, or joins into that experience too. The person who can hold the space to, in a way, dominate the energy field of other, if this other person does not release that resistance, does not fall within that energy, will not feel like they're healed at that time. And sometimes that happens too. But those predominant moments, those moments where you feel so steady, where you can do that thing on your own, is really what's the most satisfying experience. And so to answer that first question, yes, whoever is ready to really see it or to experience it in that way will experience it regardless of who is holding the space and who is bringing the physical object and who is just observing it, because the person observing it and the person physically bringing it on are creating it at the same time. We make an easier example from this often. The book that you're reading, you wrote it too. The movie that you watched, you wrote it too. The song that you're singing, you wrote it too. Not physically through you, but you were in on that creation because now you're interacting with it, and now you're interacting with it, and now you're interacting with it too. Often when friends come in to talk about their creation, we like to say in that place of receiving the idea about something, who is invited there? Just looking to feel who is invited in that too, because anyone that will ever interact with this recording, maybe thousands of years from now on, has created it, even though they're not even close to be thinking, and who knows how many iterations before getting into this physical experience. And so anyone who is at that time witnessing or creating something is for sure creating that particular experience, regardless even sometimes of the time delay and attention being given. And there is really no much difference from experiencing it. There is really no much difference if you're in a place of study, you writing the book and you reading the book is equally satisfying experience. And so depending on where you want and what do you want to flow through you and through your own activity, and what do you want to engage with as a spectator but also a writer, Kosta has been clarified. Kosta had this clarified after listening to one of the segments with a friend who was talking about things that she signs up for and then she does not do them. And Kosta used to do the same thing with books. He would buy them but never read them. Sometimes the first page or two, sometimes more than that. Rarely he would read the whole book. But does that mean that he never received the value of that book? This engagement with that particular book, this curiosity with that particular book right there, received at the time, and then sometimes intellectually also recognized, and sometimes also intellectually processed, but not necessarily at all times. And now we talked a lot about this first question, and we want to hear what was the second thing you wanted to talk about.
The second thing was, did that particular physical iteration named Sai Baba have desires and preferences? Because it appeared that he was dwelling mostly in that state of, knowing his divinity incarnate 24/7, kind of walking.
That place of making such a big preference and giving the attention to one kind of activity is what makes you believe that he's not making preferences. But for as long as these people are in physical shape, they're consistently making preferences. It might be the same preference over and over again. In other words, new layers or new aspects. It's always a different preference, but it might be showing in the same direction of that place of being still, of that place of feeling so balanced, of that place of giving minimal physical attention and more of that place of wholeness. But that place of wholeness is experienced in a variety of ways. And you get to experience so much thrill from so much of it that you can really, in a sense, milk every physical iteration to such a degree to experience it in such variety that you feel like you lived 10 lifetimes in one.
I love that. Okay. Thank you. And really quickly, so as well last week you said, once you're in that place of wholeness, steadiness, and you open the door, things begin to happen quickly. When you say open the door, do you mean from that place make a preference, or do you mean just open the door as in just be?
The door while you just are, and be excited about making preferences. In other words, you get to the place of ease from the place of making the question. So here it is, tipping point from answer to question. And the question brings some kind of focus. Preference making brings always a little bit of discomfort here and there. Depending on how much attention you give it to, it can go into more and more. But it's really that place of tipping point between answer and the question, through the question until the tipping point question to answer. That is part of all of your discomforts, negative emotions, contrasts, feeling sometimes misaligned, whatever kind of terminology you want to have. But then on tipping point from question to answer, you start softening up and having those positive feelings, feeling of comfort, feeling of ease, feeling of appreciation, feeling of love, feeling of steadiness, feeling of anything that brings you that natural state of being. And then in a clarity of answer, like in a clarity of question, there is really no emotion. And from that place of no emotion, you're ready to start moving in to open the door. So the process of you being in a positive emotion, in a place of clarity of no emotion, continuing from the place of positive emotion, some teachers will call that milking that state of positive emotion, and then opening up the door for the tipping point into the new preference. Now, once you get the hold of that, and you start having this place from answer to the tipping point for the next question, this is when you really start keeping the reins of your creation experience. In other words, you are the one opening the door, knowing I'm in this beautiful state of steady and love and natural positive emotion, but I'm now ready, knowing I can always come back to it, knowing that once I feel whole, I can never feel unwhole again, and it's just a matter of a tool that still has been working, or I'm gonna find a different tool always to find more steady and therefore more whole and therefore more of that place of wider everything that exists perspective. Now I can open the door and not be surprised, because I know that that door will open inevitably. But once I'm the one opening the door, that means that there is no surprise, because all of these, which I used to see as negative emotions and sometimes trying to run away from them, to close them, not to experience them, they do not bother me anymore, because I know there is always way to whole. That never bothers me again, because I see the value of bringing myself to the new whole, and therefore you're the one really opening the door. You're really the one looking for trouble and trouble not finding you. You're really putting the pebble in the shoe and not finding the pebble in the shoe. It's still happening. It still will always happen for as long as you choose to be physically focused. But once you see that it's you, then you really see you from the place of self and you from the place of everything that exists, mutually, integratedly, blendedly dancing through eternity.
So let's just talk about, you said that space of no emotion. Where you said you have no emotion. Do you mean the only thing, being in a place of no judgment, like non-judgment of the positive or the negative, because you're seeing the value in everything, so there's no judgment of...
No measurement. There is no measurement of any kind. Most of your measurement is happening in most of your physical focus time, which is your discovery. And then the clarity of the question that strikes you, or you can call that launching of your desire, that moment is also without emotion. It might preceded by some negative, more or less negative emotion or some discomfort, but the clarity of it is, now I know what I want. And then releasing that wanting brings you to tip the point and get to the place of more positive emotion. But once you are really in the place of steady, once you're in a place of just being, you get to the point, not for the long time, but you get to the point where even for a moment you're thoughtless, where for a moment you're emotionless. For the moment you just are, so much so that you feel like you want to stay there and then apply that feeling of everything that exists into your physical experience.
Got it. Thank you so much for this delicious conversation. I appreciate you.
As delicious as the ice cream waiting for you in the fridge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
We'll take a brief segment of break and then continue with your glorious questions, as we feel so much has been stirred up. For now, that's it. Segment 2. Here now, present, in this moment, in every moment, excited to hear what you have cooked up over the break. Go ahead.
Hi, Weola. Really cool how the first segment just really ties perfectly into what I had thought about asking you. And I noticed that you even used words that you've not used before, and they are words that I had wrote down in my question already. So of course it's like we're all perfectly just aligned.
You might want to check out all of the nooks and crannies of your room because we have planted cameras all over.
I love you so much. I can't even stand it. Oh my God, I just can't even stand it. Okay, so my question is about, so we have situations in life, right? And of course we've asked for them because as we sign up to come here physically, we want to have experiences that give us knowledge and understanding about what we want, what we don't want. That's how we make our decisions, our preferences. That's how we gauge and decide. And I love that process. And what I'm wondering about is when experiences in our lives, because this is something that I heard from Abraham not long ago, where she was really hitting it hard with this guy in the hot seat about when your expectation, rather, when your desire meets your expectation. It could go either way, I suppose. But when those meet, then you actually achieve the things that you're asking for or wanting. Because if you want it but you don't believe it, there's a push and pull that you can't manifest what you're really desiring. And so there was that whole idea about like expectation in there. And so I was thinking, there's plenty of experiences that we've all had in our lives that we may have accidentally now formed an expectation around because maybe it happened 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I mean, maybe we were out of alignment and it happened 4 times, but now we've accidentally formed this expectation, right? But we know what we desire. So it's like when we can get into the broader perspective, now knowing what we know about, you know, your teaching, Abraham teaching, so many other teachings, like, is there, because I feel like that expectation in the wrong way now makes us feel like we want to sort of alter or manipulate further experiences, which I don't think really would serve us, because we want to get all of the experiences. We want to feel everything. We want to know what feels good, what doesn't feel good. That's how we make our choices and preferences. But there's something that seems to be underlying there where we've accidentally had these expectations formed. Now we feel like we've got to kind of come into a moment of guardedness or hesitation because we have an expectation about it. And so I think I just want to soften or isolate somehow those emotions or expectations and not bring them into my future experiences. But it's sometimes really, really hard not to do that. And so I was just kind of curious about what you would say about that.
Those have place in your creation process, your beliefs and your expectations, but they're only the tool. They're the tool as your emotions are the tool, as in a wider perspective, your body and the mind is the tool for this life force coming through you to find expression. And so your expectations and beliefs that you're forming, in other words, forming and then changing, forming and then changing, forming and then changing. So some of them, as you said, have not served you. They served you very well to find and start being a process of making preferences. We just started saying and made this analogy about the baby who comes without any preferences. So you came without any preferences from this wide place, and then you slowly start making preferences. You're calling for your diaper to be changed. You're calling for your food to be prepared. You're calling for you to be cuddled and relaxed so you can go ahead and sleep. In other words, you start making those preferences. And sometimes you take that movement, and at some point, as we said, young adolescent years, you have so much movement in making preferences that you believe that you are the preferences that you're making. But then you start moving to the other way around, where you start softening it up. And that's what we say many teachers got you to understand that. To understand, to recognize that there are some thought patterns or habitual patterns, or even that what you call beliefs and that what you call expectations. And then yes, once you start seeing that those do not serve you, you go and build new ones. And then once you see that those do not serve you, you go and build new ones. But sometimes at some point it becomes a laborious endeavor. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about this effort that sometimes comes in into switching and building and switching and building. And what if you're just flowing? What if you're just dancing, understanding that those are the tools, that those beliefs and expectations are not the tools for you to get what you want to, and then go back to tools so you can get what you want to, and then you go back to tools so you can get what you want to. But those tools are there, so what everything that you're getting is part of your experience with equal value. Sometimes not so satisfying, sometimes very satisfying, but in the nature moves you through all aspects of the creation process with so much steadiness that you're not even making a preference of any kind of beliefs or any kind of expectations when it comes to that. We understand that every identity you take has expectations and has beliefs and has opinions and has judgments and has thoughts. And that can go as far as you are in that particular context, on that particular topic, or that identity that you're talking about. And we're not saying diminish all identities. We're not saying move into non-physical. What we're saying is that the switching between the two, the three, the infinite number of identities that you're having, meaning different focal points, meaning different topics, meaning different outlooks, meaning different direction to variety of those topics that are taking your attention. The movement between does not have to be so rigid, and that is what you feel sometimes as an effort in changing this belief into that expectation and this belief into that expectation, because you do not see yet how easy from feeling the place of steady can be for you to switch from this identity to that identity to this identity to that identity. And as you're shifting your attention from one to another identity that you're playing at that moment, the role that you're playing at that moment, then you will see that as you're changing the roles and as you're changing the topics, your flashlight of your attention is moving. And therefore you start seeing, as we started speaking, blurred lines about your steady, sometimes very stubborn beliefs and sometimes very stubborn expectations. Because it is not about you that you're trying to get them to be different but still stubborn to match the other one that it's also stubborn on that frequency that will get you this. You're looking to loosen them all up so you can see in a bigger movement, in a movement of so much more balance, different perspective and a different perspective and a different perspective being wider, and then place of self and place of one and place of self. That is what it feels to start blurring the lines between your beliefs and opinions and judgments, and have more of this everything that exists perspective as you go about your life. Not being married only to that identity and that belief and that opinion and that expectation, but not replacing it with equally strong one. Not saying, I do not want to have this belief that I have to have negative experiences every day, now shifted that I'm going to have experiences with positive experiences only, and then shifting it. That's still a strong belief. The moment you loosen up, the moment you ease up, the movement is so much more comfortable that you stop making really discrimination between the emotions.
Yeah, that's perfect. And so, like, would you say, like, if you're in a moment and you can be aware and you say, I'm feeling something I don't really want to feel, would you say there's value in, like, because, you know, Abraham always talks about going general.
By saying, this is what I feel, it is what it is. This is what I feel. I'm not giving it the judgment. This is what it is. I'm not giving the belief or expectation that I'm not supposed to feel that way. It is what it is. I'm feeling at this moment for this amount of time, and that can be few seconds, or that can be hours and days and weeks, keeping my attention on that, because you saying that you might not feel that at that moment keeps you to feel that at that time too. In other words, blurring the lines at this moment, seeing that your emotion is a tool and saying, at this moment in time, I feel this emotion. I know that emotion system that I have, this guidance I'm feeling from this brilliant, the most developed technology ever seen and will ever be seen, my emotional system is the tool to get me into the balance of my own question answer dance, my balance between focus and unfocus, my balance between in line of discovery of the question and in line with discovery of an answer, but always in line with discovery.
Yes. Yes. And the last part of that is that when I'm aware of an emotion, I have the freedom to choose if I want to keep that feeling or if I want to release that feeling, because maybe I like it and maybe I don't. I use it as a tool. I learned something real quick. Maybe I just decide I would like to pivot. And I'm wondering if there's a value in like a kind of pivoting away and then holding like that generality more so until that, because we all experience feelings at times that we are uncomfortable with, which of course we know is not a bad thing. They are guidance. It's good to know where you're at. But then that comes that moment where it says, well, I actually get to choose. Do I want to continue this feeling or do I want to change this feeling? And some people really struggle with changing the feeling that they don't want. So I was thinking, well, like, is there like a value in like really just, that awareness of like, oh, this is a moment I don't want. I'm going to choose to pivot. I'm going to just go general and I'm going to hold. I'm just going to hold right there until that feeling kind of like surpasses me. And then I can go back into the situation or the experience and I'm going to have a new thought. I'm just going to choose a new thought. Like, am I out of line there or is that okay?
Or you can, everything is okay. Any tool that you have, we just believe you don't have to go and wrestle so much. If you get to the point where you can ask yourself the question or have the awareness, which you're having right now, that at this moment, this emotion is active within me based off of the preferences that I'm making. And sometimes it's a positive, sometimes it's a negative emotion. But at the moment of me making the preference, I know that this is just the tool for me to more steady. Everything I experience and give attention is the tool to more steady. And sometimes it's a positive feeling tool to get me into the place of steady sooner, and sometimes negative feeling tool that gets me a little bit longer time. But the way that you move, without even saying as much as we said, and definitely as much as you said, you just realize that your emotion is the tool, not your identity. The only time when you own the emotion and you want to own this emotion versus the other emotion is when you start making so much preference and such big deal, and therefore if you're getting it there, then you're getting super excited. But if you're getting super excited and so easy, then usually you're not in a place of really of holding on to that identity. You use the word hold, and we say do not hold. We say release your temporary identity that you have with that particular emotion and see where your focus takes you next. That is the true definition of discovery.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to chew on that. That feels pretty good. Thank you, Weola.
Really, really excellent conversation. Go ahead. We're ready for more.
Hi, Weola. I have a question about strong desires and how to find steadiness and allowing. And I'm so glad you said about happiness being movement, because that's kind of what I want to talk about, I think. And one thing I'm curious about is, for example, I have resistance towards working for someone. So I find myself often quitting jobs, and at the same time it doesn't seem to allow what I'm searching for. Like, I want to have more fun in that process. So for example, the last work I had, it was amazing, and at the same time I had this very strong feeling that now it's time to move on. And I love change. I feel so alive when I'm changing, trying new things, and I feel so expansive. And in this job, at the same time, I felt limited, and I had this urge to, I think I wanted to, the feeling of expansion. I had the feeling I wanted to express my truth, create more, and I couldn't do that inside my job. So I think I was seeking a different vibration, a different energy, and shifting surroundings helped me do that. And knowing that anything is possible, that makes me so excited. And this time it feels like I almost don't have a choice than move with that desire. And even though I know that I can find what I'm looking for wherever I am, but still it's almost like I don't have any choice to move with that. And like this last time, I felt so connected to source, so connected to everything. I had this really peaceful feeling. And I came to the place where someone said earlier, I had no preference. I found like this peace, and it didn't matter if I went left or right. But I made a choice, and I went into the unknown, quitting my job. And I went quickly from steady to experiencing a lot of resistance. And I couldn't seem to finding the, allow the progress that I wanted. And Abraham talks about that, you must feel very happy where you are before you can move on. And that's a question that comes up for me. And I'm not sure, but I'm wondering what can I benefit from seeing here in that resistance coming up, which doesn't allow me to follow, to continue in this flow. So maybe my question is, what is that resistance and what can I see in this?
You don't have to ask any more questions because you've already activated infinite number of them, and we'll offer you some words that you will hear on many different layers for you. First, we want you to know that inner calling that you're having, it's you. It's you in your own movement between question and answer. And sometimes that inner calling is to get you from the place of playing a question ping pong or not sure what are you doing at that time. You're focused too much, and sometimes it gets you to the place of ease and therefore the answers. And sometimes your own question answer dance gets you to the other way around where you feel steady and apply it. In other words, when you really feel like you have the tools to get to steady, then you can go and give your attention to anything. Then you can go and try to have tea time with someone you might consider an enemy, or to go into the places where that have scared you before, because from that place of steady, you're not going to challenge your steady, you're going to apply your steady. And it is not about how many jobs you're switching or how you need to even feel while you're switching them, for as long as you know what part in your creation process these experiences are taking. Are you covering? We often talk about mirror reflections. Everything you give your attention to is a mirror reflection. And sometimes it's easy to cover the mirror. In other words, you have the calling about the change, and this is the job. I'm going to cover this company and I'm going to look what there is. Because this one gave me what I wanted for a moment in time, and now I don't want to be distracted. In other words, if you feel steady and then you don't want to look here and you do not want to compare, but more often than not, you cover it because you're not comfortable, because you're not sure, and you want to make sure, sometimes even convince yourself to go and search around. The way you know that your steadiness is so there is that when you do not feel like the only option or choice is to leave the place, but that the only choice is to go into buffet of opportunities, and then from the place of steady, measure them up and see which one is now more satisfying to you. Now that's really speaking about steady and applying it to the choices. When you feel like you do not have any other choice, most of the time is when you feel called to make the change based off of something. In other words, to look for a different mirror to bring you back the steadiness. Kosta had this experience long time ago. He called it inner calling. He called it happened to him only a couple of times in life. But this particular one, for longest time, maybe he will even listen to this recording because we're not even sure if he's ever resonated with that in this way, is that this particular change from the company in dance that he was part of into the company that he is in right now, he always felt this gut feeling of when he got an offer to move immediately because it was the better choice. Now, regardless, there were some aspects of it that were so appetizing, but there was so much of that which you call resistance in the previous place that having an offer that felt a little bit better at that time felt like a life-changing calling from within. It's a very slight experiences that we're talking about here, very tender line about how to know this. Kosta being masterful in following his instinct most of his life, at this particular moment hooked up on that part of, I love to be surrounded by these people. These people are bringing these people. And for what I want to do, here is what it is, and here is what it is, and here is what it is. But he did not see this resistance or therefore releasing of that the resistance as a bonus. He saw it as an equally important part of living this other place. If he was to be really honest with himself at that time, he could have stayed there for some more to measure it up nicely. Eventually, he would have probably left anyway. But because sometimes this resistance is also big, you move on and see those things that are appetizing to you more clearly. Nothing wrong with this experience, and nobody's saying that it's always so easy and always so balanced in a way, because some of those experiences will be like that too. There is nothing wrong with your experiences that you're having. You just want to know that once you have your steady, so much so, quote unquote, on leash, once your steady is on your leash, once you are holding the leash or the reins of your own creation process, once you know that if you ever felt steady and know what the steady is, you also know you always had some tools to get you to that steady, whether it's appreciation or meditation or sport or anything else, that dancing, whatever gives you your heart to sing and to get you into that place. Once you know that there are tools and those tools will always be changing, but they will always be there, then you know that the steady is always within your reach. And then you're eager to open the door. Then you're eager to open the door to see what's the pebble in the shoe for the next and the next and the next interaction. Not because you feel like you're limited here, but because you feel by exploring and measuring your options, you're cracking the boundaries of that feeling, and then you really, truly feel free.
And another thing I'm thinking of, if another opportunity comes, I think I feel very easily if that resonates with me or not. So I can choose what feels more expansive. But what I see that I often do, that I get this, it seems like a calling, an expansiveness, and I take a leap without having an opportunity.
We want to ask you the question.
That something is there.
We want to ask you the question. When you leave the place, is there any resistance in that other place? In other words, do you get bored from your steadiness and then you go and look for trouble? Is this the feeling that you have?
When I look back at it, I see that I'm like searching for trouble, searching for...
As long as you understand that the trouble gives you expansion, you're on the perfect track. For as long as you know that releasing the resistance of something that ties you in other words, you want to be honest with yourself here, knowing that if the particular mirror reflection is so soothing to you, so easy to you, almost puts you in a meditative state, then it's the time for you to look for trouble. But if you have the feeling that something is bounding you, or that you feel limited, that means that there is so much more expansion over there. And your brilliant teachers that are saying you want to be satisfied before you move on to the other place will broaden it up to you. You want to feel at ease, meditative, as our friend was saying, in a place of wholeness where you almost feel like you don't have any desires, and then go and look for trouble. Not to feel like you convince yourself that you're looking for trouble, but you're actually avoiding some trouble too. all of them are fine, but this is really, really what most of you are calling fine-tuning, really finding the resonance with something that is so, so delicate and yet so brilliant for you to understand.
I feel that I'm doing both, that I do know that I search for trouble, and I love that because I say to myself, okay, I sure want to do this because this can be like painful or difficult, but I choose that. I choose to go into that. But I also see that sometimes where what I'm leaving, I see also that I'm trying to get away from something that I'm actually there is an opportunity for me to step up, to explore, to express myself.
If you're going from trouble to more trouble, you might want to reconsider. If you're going from ease and steady into some trouble, that's the way to go. If you're going from ease and steady and then into trouble, that's the way to go. We're not saying make your life difficult. We're not saying go for trouble and make yourself to suffer in the process of it. What we're saying is see what brings you expansion. It can be the same person over and over again, or you can find the same person over and over again in a variety of organizations. You get the similar thing. Usually, that's why we often say the most stubborn mirror reflections are the long-lasting relationships. Your spouses, your kids, your parents, your long-term bosses, your long-term employees. In other words, anyone that you're interacting with, because there's no running away from you when you're in front of some mirror that knows you so well, that knows a variety of iterations of you, that knows your expansion that you call. In other words, when you can measure up your expansion based off of that more and more and more, you realize that you can apply it anywhere else and still get that particular resonance right back. The best teachers for you are those consistent experiences. And so as you go and have your experiences, you want to see about that balance. How much trouble are you leaving for how much to get to? Trouble being an easy preference making place. And as we described, the steadiness that you described sometimes feel like this and sometimes feels like that. And for as long as you know that switching sometimes job gets you back to steady, and that's when there is some kind of not so comfortable situations that you leave for, that is one aspect. And sometimes you feel so steady that it's time to look for trouble. Then you really, really, really are seeing how each of those have the part in your creation process.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Really, really great conversation. We're ready for more. Go ahead. Speak up. We do not hear you.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
A little bit louder.
A little bit louder? Sorry about that. Just change my audio.
That's much better. Go
Okay,
ahead.
okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So my question goes in a direction around desires and I guess releasing those. Over the last 2 years, I've gained a lot of clarity in what direction I want to go career-wise, and I've left my 9-to-5 job, and the journey itself has been really, really great, but I've gotten to a point where I've felt a stronger desire to have more clients again. And I just find myself in a place where I feel like I'm letting go of the when and how, but then I keep finding myself at some point, I guess, worrying about this when and thinking, well, it's been quite a while, and not really seeing the desire come into my experience the way I'd like it to. And I've had moments where, for example, I've felt the gratitude and thankfulness ahead of time and just kind of thank the universe ahead of time for a new client that will come into my experience. And the next morning, a colleague of mine said, oh, I have a friend looking for somebody and I've recommended you. What's the best way to get in touch? And it just felt so wonderful because it felt like it happened so quickly and with such ease because I just let it go and trusted that it would come into my experience. But then that person changed their mind. And so I see glimpses of kind of something happening. But then in the end, it doesn't. So I'm kind of wondering how I can move from the desire more into the discovery and just release that desire, because I just feel like I've been there for a long time.
Well, we'll give you a clear step-by-step experience when it comes to your creation process. We often talk about the question-answer dance, but we have another way that we like to use. But before we get there, we want you to know that the reason why this has been happening in a glimpse, in other words, you were checking in to see where your desire is, and some things start coming through, you release any kind of resistance to the place of gratitude and appreciation and feeling good. But then the part that trips you up is that you're saying universe to bring something to you, and we want you to know that it's you bringing something to you. It is always you bringing something to you. What trips you up is that you are not sure who is supposed to bring this to you. Now, we're not saying you going after that client and trying to make an effort, anything. What we want to bring to your attention is that which you call universe or God or divine, or we call often everything that exists. It's you from the wider perspective, and then you from the place of self, and then you from the wider perspective, and then you physically from the place of self. Always blended, always integrated. Nothing for you to hook up. There's no connection or disconnection. Always, 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 at all times present, blended, integrated. And so once you understand that which you call universe is you from a perspective of wider perspective, and that which you give attention to and focus is you from the place of self, then you start understanding that everything that you experience in your physicality is consistently dance between the self and one, and self and one, and self and one, and self and one. And that experience is really what keeps your creation eternal, in the sense that you cannot stop having those which you call desires come through you. And now we'll offer you those words about the creation process. Creation process being you're observing and making choices, observing and choosing, observing and choosing. That is, like we like to say, in this place of kind of like a surface experience where you're observing and choosing through your powerful focus and making preferences through variety. And once you make the preference of clarity, I want these clients to come through, I want more clients to come through, then from that moment you get the clarity of what is that it's wanted. In that clarity, there is nothing for you to do. There is nothing for you to focus on. There is not even for you to focus on those clients to come through, or how those clients will come through, or when will they come through, because that wanting is what you want to release. You want to release that clarity of the wanting or desire into discovery, and then allow yourself, by getting into that tipping point where you release the wanting into discovery, to start really observing through other sense of observe and choose, to see and check in once in a while about how your desire is doing. Is that desire a big gap? It always starts as some kind of a gap. Otherwise, you would not have the clarity of the wanting. Otherwise, it would not feel to you like a desire. So it's smaller or bigger, but it is always a little bit of a gap. And what you're checking in with is to see how closer that gap is. So if you have had desire about the clients and they were not coming through, and now all of a sudden these signs, as you call them, from the universe are coming through, these are not signs from the universe. This is you finding more blendedness within you, getting to the place of wider perspective. So in that wider perspective, you can see more that how close you are, how your desire is doing. In other words, how close is it to come to you into your experience. So as it moves, then next time you check in, the call will move on. The next time you move in, the call will move on, and then you will get more and more experiences like that until more and more people start coming through as your clients.
So once that wanting is clear, would you say, this is, I guess, what I kind of learned from Abraham, is it best to then just focus on everything but that in order to just kind of not
Most of the time.
stay in the desire?
Most of the time, because sometimes, depending on how this big desire is. If it's about an ice cream, you can give it attention, and usually if it's not that big of a desire, you release it and it shows up. But if it's about something that you wanted for quite some time, if it's something that you wanted for even longer time, that bigger desire, you've been checking in for quite some time, and you want to find your measurement amount that serves you. In other words, not ever to not give attention to desire, because that is impossible with the bigger desires. But once you do, not to stay there for too long. Check in with your wanting and release it. 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 And if you could not give it any attention, you will most likely have the biggest chance for it to come closer to you or to come sooner to you. Kosta wanted to start this online course before even this flow was happening. He had so much satisfaction in knowing that he wants to give some kind of experience in some kind of exchange outside of the dance world that was his main identity for so long. So he looked into the life coaching models, and then he joined this program, and then he created the funnel so for people know what this whole thing is about. And so many things resonated there, but some of them were not resonating because he was thinking about clients. What would his dance clients think if they see him about this? Would they see him in a completely different light? How can he open himself up for so many more people, but still maybe keep that identity away from others until it gets through? In other words, so much thinking started coming through. And then some people started getting interested about that conversation, but nobody was signing up. And at some point, he just released it. He forgot about it. After giving it really intense intention for about a couple of months, he released it. And at the moment when he was thinking about it the least, or not really at all, the information came through him. The message came through him. Not even through him, through Armand. Someone said, I'm looking for a life coach to put me in a better space. And Armand put the little tag on that page, and Kosta did not even reach out. This person reached out to Kosta and said, I don't know why do I have this feeling, but I feel like you will be the great person for me, and I'm looking for this, and can we get on a call? And Kosta got on a call, and this person said, within minutes, I felt better than the last 3 to 6 months. I have no idea what you're having and what you're offering, but whatever you do have, I'm buying it. In other words, these experiences come to you when you really release this desire, and it's really always about when and how. It is not about that coming through you, because that desire is there. The moment you have desire about the clients, all of these clients are lined up for you. There's so many funnels of clients that are lined up for you that if you were to let them all in at once, you might get overwhelmed. And that's why you want to keep your resonance with your own steadiness first, and allow yourself to get the first one and the second one and the third one without thinking, how is this going to bring you this, or how is this going to bring you that? Because you're there, you're alive, you're breathing and eating and sleeping and having all normal functions of beautiful, full-fledged life. So whatever you give your attention to, you're looking for it to be more steady, more satisfying, more steady, more satisfying. And why would this not be as satisfying of a process as getting the simple meal from the store? Why wouldn't this be as easy as you pouring the glass of water? Once desire, once you and your desire, once that bigness of desire does not feel big but natural, that is the time where you get to experience it.
Thank you. What I'm hearing in that is a big thing of just also trusting, and with that removing the when and how. Is there any way to trust more and not have this neediness around, wanting the client also because you'd rather not find another short-term job just to be able to make it, to get a bit more money, because that neediness is in there, and that's not trusting them. That's kind of being a bit, wanting the when to happen, wanting it to happen when I want it to happen.
In wanting it to happen when you want it to happen, in going to sleep when you want to sleep, in going to eat when you want to eat, in wanting to have experiences when and how you want them, you are sometimes looking for excuses not to find your steady. In other words, anything you give your attention to is satisfying. Regardless of this, you're not shifting now from a part-time identity person to a full-time identity person of this thing that you do, because you will never do only one thing. You will never do even predominantly only one thing. So anything you give your attention to is really, in a sense, measured up or competing with this. So once you see it from that broader perspective, that working with a client is the same like working with a part-time job, the same like making the meal, the same like hanging out with friends, the same like having a life partner, the same like being with your kids, the same like being with your mother, the same like watching the news, the same like watching a movie, the same like reading the book. All of these activities are equal in your experience, all of them giving you the value. And once you try, once you really see that part, then there is no issue about the trust. Because the trust of you switching into only one identity to be predominant within you is what the trouble is. It's not about the trust, it's about you sometimes feeling that in order for you to be successful, or in order for you to really feel fulfilled, is to do only that one thing that you know that gives you satisfaction. Well, imagine yourself now doing only that thing in the amount that you have, 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 5 hours a week, and then what? Would you give your attention to something else? Yes. Would that something else take equal amount of time? Maybe. Would that something else definitely take some amount of time? For sure. And once you feel that anything you give your attention to can be as satisfying, then you do not really, we're joking in a little harsh way, but really not discriminate between what are you giving your attention to, because you then feel so steady that you're looking for more trouble. In other words, looking for more things to give attention to. And then you feel like it's okay to have a part-time job and to have the clients until that becomes steady, and then move it to the other side if that's necessary, or keep it forever like that. Kosta has been having this conversation as this flow started exactly about a year ago. And then Armando and Kosta seeing the value of it for them, and more friends coming through. And at one point, they really started looking into it. They had a clarity that this will be predominantly their life work. In other words, it's so satisfying, and satisfaction they're getting on so many layers for this work to be presented in this way and this way and this way. And then Kosta started asking himself, well, does this mean that I need to give up my dancing identity, my dance teaching identity, my life coaching identity with the courses, with specific tools that I want to give to the world based off of all of my experiences? And for some time, there was a little bit of this tug of war of saying, when am I going to not have to go and teach the dance? When am I not going to have to even look maybe about this course? When is it going to be hundreds and thousands of people doing these broadcasts and stuff so we can focus only on that? And then Armando and Kosta focused mostly on that for 3 times a week. There was 7 broadcasts each month. There were numerous live calls coming through Facebook page. There were so many private sessions happening at that time that Kosta realized that while this is a very satisfying experience, it is not the only experience that he wants to have. He still wanted to continue to dance. He still wanted to continue to give his attention in building the courses. He still wants to play tennis as a hobby. He still wants to go back to the floor and perform and compete. He still wants to engage with friends. He still wants to be with the parents. He still wants to meditate. Once you find your own steady, you do not make the difference. You're just looking to see what is the most satisfying flow. Because one thing, if anything, is sure about you and every other focusing mechanism, you are never, ever, ever narrowed down in only one identity at a time.
That's so clear and very helpful. Thank you so much.
Really, really excellent conversations today. Go ahead. We're ready.
Weola, you're so amazing. As soon as this question came into my head while you were speaking with Lindsay, you started, and my question had to do with identity. You started using the word identity, and then again with Samara.
You want to check for those little cameras we implanted in your mind too, not only to your space, but only to your neurons that are firing up, and we just catch on them. Yes.
You are the real deal. I feel it because we got that link going. And so that feels really good. And so you validate me and I validate you right back. And so I want to talk with you about identity and belongings, material goods. and also mix a little respect in there too. Like, okay, I'll give you a couple examples. My sister recently became non-physical, and my grandmother became non-physical a little while back. And my grandmother had given me a silk tree, and the leaves are starting to fall off of it. It's getting old, and I want to let it go. And so I'm thinking about setting the silk tree at the curb and let somebody drive past and just adopt the tree, you know. And I don't think that will disrespect my grandmother. And I just, you know, but I've been putting that off because it's from grandma. And if it wasn't from grandma, I would have done this so long ago, you know, but it's just part of that. I have resistance about letting go of gifts that people have given me because they have given me that gift. And a lot of times I think I'm going to keep the love and I'm going to let go of the gift. And most times I have no problem with that. So I'm fine. I'm going to do it. But this material belongings and identity, I want to talk with you about that. Do you want me to elaborate? Or are you ready to go?
Always ready to go. What you're talking about is something that gets your attention and you refer to it. In other words, we understand that there is this feel of energy that you might be feeling mostly with people or with beings or with trees, but even those physical material things are consistently oscillating, pulsating, and moving through. And if you sometimes feel as this reminds you of your grandmother and will continue to remind you of your grandmother, either way, if you feel satisfaction about it, if you feel the resonance about it, it is really not about that thing. It's about something that activates your thought. And sometimes you do not want to get rid of things because you might feel it's not going to activate a thought about something or someone for quite some time. You might want to talk to Kosta. He is a professional hoarder. He hoards everything. He has his full room of all of his even school notebooks from his first grade. His parents are not touching that part of a thing because he started slowly making his way about it. In other words, revisiting it with every single time he goes there. He would open up the whole thing and then he would pull up certain things and certain memories and he would see how interesting this was. And then he thinks, oh, these books I would like my kids to see sometimes. I would want them to see how I was writing in a notebook, in this language, on this subject. I never want to get rid of these pages that my friend from 5th grade that I might never hear again from, but that reminds me of this area and of this area. So he started downsizing and started organizing. And instead of thinking about it, I want this out or in, he started thinking about it as a dance. I will revisit it at all times. I will check in it with that. I'm not giving expiration time when this has to go. I will always find a place to keep it if I do really want to keep it. But I also know that in the process of discovery, which is revisiting these things at all times, you get to experience your memories and memories of others to start really moving even more because they've moved long time ago. Those memories have shifted so many times ago. And if you feel like they're going to bring you to that time even that was before, it's not the same. It will never be the same because it was that moment in time. And so once you understand that these memorabilia is really about the feedback of the movement, not for you to compare yourself where were you and where are you now, because that where were you is still in the now, and that which were you and it's still in the now, or grandma giving it to you, it's still in the now, and therefore has nothing to do really with that which was before. So as long as you find this ease and seeing this as a movement, then you see that the things and the people, not even your own body and mind and emotions or any other tool that you're using, are really never-ending identities, because they are. But your life force expressing itself with your attention through this and through this and through this and through this keeps it all so fascinating and interesting that you cannot have enough.
Thank you very much. Good talk.
Really, really great conversation. We're ready. We'll take few other questions, or as many as there are.
Hi, I wanted to ask you, I think I've asked this question at you at one point in a different version already before, but I was just so curious about how...
That is not the same question anymore. So as we were just talking about it, you never have to worry about what questions or statements are coming through. You might be even reading the same words from the same page over and over again as Kosta was reading his childhood books, and will never, ever be the same.
Yeah, that is true. So it's like when I started my last questions with you, you made the joke about planting the cameras all over the house. And then you even used that same joke with Dory. And
we are everywhere.
Okay. And I wonder why I can hear the humor. I can hear the humor coming from Weola, but I don't see it. There's no expression of any kind of emotion when Weola is coming through. And I continually want to understand why we don't see any, emotion through Kosta as Weola. Is there a reason for that? And I just curious about it.
Well, you brought up something very important. You might feel it's a light curiosity, but it's a very big topic. We consistently, at all times, live beyond the emotions. At all times experiencing everything that you're experiencing from this perspective. You are, from this perspective, experiencing it at all times. And while you do have a variety of emotions that get you to feel steady and sometimes not steady, and positive and negative, and anything on any of those scales that you might have awareness and understanding of, this steadiness that we talk about, this being that is happening, is so consistent in this wider perspective that is what you're getting. Sometimes people might use words like calibrating or pivoting to or moving to or using the tools to release the resistance or to get into more of that ease. That beyond, not without, beyond, very aware of all of those tools that you're having, including emotions, but experiencing it from the place of being in the now. That is the place of steady that we are at, and you from that place of everything that exists.
So Weola feels, you feel excited and in movement and clear and steady all the time. That's what it is. Right?
It is steadiness on crack.
Okay. So
undeniable, never ending, always faster paced steadiness of eternity.
It's interesting because you're non-physical and we are physical. And
there is no distinction between the two. And that is why you keep asking these questions, and you will, until you resonate with that which is you from that perspective. There is no we and us. We refer to it only because of this format of conversation. But we also often say this is you. So if you say instead of us, if you say, so here I am mostly predominantly with the physical focus, and here I am coming through Kosta's mouth as a predominantly everything that exists perspective, then you're getting closer to be accurate in description of what's going on here.
I feel as a physical being, we will always be just slightly away from being the same frequency as a non-physical.
That is simply not true, because there is no separation between physical and non-physical. You are not less than. You are equal. You are not less than. You are God. You're not less than. You're human. You're not less than yourself. You're not less than your universe. You're not less than. You're one. You're not less than. You're everything that exists. You're not less than. You're divine. You're not less than. You are really, really, really eternally glued to the hip and equally have an opportunity to experience what's experienced from this broader perspective as you go about every and any action in your physical focus.
Awesome. That was like a rampage on crack. Thank you. Thank you, Weola.
Sometimes we need to raise Kosta's voice a little bit, and that's why he is getting addicted to these beautiful honey drops to soothe his throat of excitement that flows because of your brilliant conversations. Go ahead, we'll take one more question.
Hi, it's me again. Just kind of something that came into my consciousness that I wanted to bounce off of you was that conversation that you had with Armand about happiness. My perception of happiness was alignment, but my definition of alignment is seeing life through the eyes of my higher self. So like, you know, in this moment of time, my physical perspective and the perspective of my higher self, there is like resonance between that perspective. And so, you know, when you said happiness as movement, I guess what I'm really asking you is that, you know, I've always defined, I guess, happiness as seeing life through the eyes of my higher self. Can you explain what's your perspective of this and how does movement tie in with that?
You can put it in the box of positive emotion only. So there are negative emotions, there are positive emotions. Happiness falls into positive emotions. It's on my way to steady. It's on my way to get the answer. It's on my way to do that. But everything that you have from the place of steady, every time you're the one opening the door, isn't that a happy experience too? You're so steady that you know that whatever comes your way, you have tools to go back to steady, to experience more and more and more steady. Then you're opening the door. Then your trouble is happy. Then your making preference is happy. Then your tipping point from question to answer is equally satisfying than tipping point when you're releasing that question into the answer. In other words, once you do not start making difference between the emotions but see them as tools for your clear, steady, blended experience, once you do not assign so much identity into them for too long. We're not saying do not experience emotions. We're saying do not make career out of it.
Is that not because, you know, like you talk about that steadiness when you're making, you know, you're opening the door from steadiness. Is that not seeing life through the eyes of your higher self?
It does, for as long as you can see that the discomfort is happy, for as long as you can see that some trouble is happy, for as long as you can see that being angry also has happy in it too, because it moves you to more and more and more satisfaction. Once you do not see the difference between those, but you see them as clear tools for your beautifully blended question-answer dance, then you're really not looking to assign more that which you call higher self and lower self, or physical self and higher self. Then you really are seeing things the way they are, which is always interwoven, blended experience of everything that exists with your current physical identity.
So in other words, I could be experiencing anger, I could be experiencing a frustration or happiness or bliss. And if I'm at this day, I'm not judging the emotion.
You will find really celebrating part. Sometimes not at the same moment, but you will not, again, make the career about just loving expression, holding on to it until eventually you give attention to something else, or you're not going to make career out of anger just because you feel like that's where you're supposed to stay. In other words, more you start blurring the lines between all of your experiences when it comes to your focus unfocused dance, question answer dance, then all of the emotions become so beneficial that it's easier for you to navigate through those infinite identities that you are really seeking to experience.
Okay, I love that. Yes, the infinite. So seeing the benefit and the value of the infinite identities that I am experiencing.
Yes, because as you go and trying to hold on, no matter how good or bad it feels, sometimes you hold on to it. Having so much focus on something that's resistance, you're holding on to the resistance. And then you release that resistance and then you try to start holding on to that place of love and satisfaction, well, that's also resistance. In other words, once you release all of that, once you release and start really allowing yourself to blur the lines, then you can really experience so many different vantage points. And that's when truly, fully, your full-fledged life experience starts blossoming, because you are moving from one lane to another lane of your identities based on what you give your attention to. And you're not shifting it quickly because you want to run away from something negative, or you're not trying to hold on to it only one because you're feeling good, because you know that the switching is really the most natural place, that the dance, oscillation, movement, that what you call vibration, frequency, is really in the nature of everything.
Yeah, so it's the movement between the emotions, or the emotionless even, that is happiness.
The movement and ease with which you are the one directing the movement might be the clearest definition of happiness.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Can I ask another request before we go?
Go ahead.
So it's our friend's birthday, Lindsay's birthday, and I was thinking maybe Weola can have some words to celebrate this beautiful being's life.
The day that you entered this physical iteration is always a special day. The special day that you find so much more resonance with everything that exists part of you. Oftentimes, many formulating those conditions, regardless of how much you need them to be in that place of steady. But that another circle around the sun gets you to the perspective of remembrance of how you've entered this and every other physical iteration. There are special things about the birthdays because it puts you easier in that place. And while you can find all of those moments in any other day, it seems that you get with so much more ease on the date where you entered your physical experience. That place of reminding you that you are at all times blended, that you're so blended that you choose to be physical, so blended that you choose to look for more and more expression through anything you give your attention to. And when you do give your attention to, from that place of wider perspective, you're at such charge about everything that is happening that you walk on earth in a place of really feeling equally as human as you are God. There is no separation between you and the divine. There is only blendedness, interwoven experiences that you're having right now. Every tree, every animal, every cloud, every piece of inanimate object you might imagine, all other humans at all times one, always moving, pulsating, and oscillating. And there is always desire coming through, your desire coming through from this wider perspective, that your dance becomes the most fluid, the most fluent, the most satisfying, comfortable, wavy ride for all eternity. In appreciation of your brilliant questions, bringing so much clarity not only to you, but everyone who's put these words in Kosta's mouth during this broadcast for now, very satisfyingly, while always spying on you. For now, that's it.